Something quietly unfolded within the Philadelphia Eagles roster, and if you really pay attention to the pattern behind this move, it tells you a lot more than just a simple free agency signing. The Eagles have added edge rusher Trion Shyena on a one-year deal, and at first glance, this might look like a depth move, but there's a deeper strategy here that fans should not ignore. This is exactly the type of move that has become a signature of Howie Roseman's approach. The Eagles are not just filling roster spots, they are targeting players with high draft pedigree, guys who were once viewed as elite prospects coming out of college. Trion Shyena fits that mold perfectly. A former first-round pick, 32nd overall in 2021 out of Washington, he entered the league with expectations, size, and athletic traits that made him a highly intriguing edge rusher. At 6'5", 260 pounds, he has the physical tools you want at the position. And while his career hasn't fully lived up to that first-round billing, the Eagles are clearly betting on something else. Their ability to develop talent better than most organizations in the league. This is not random. This is calculated. Trion Shyena has played 82 games in the NFL with 45 starts, which means he brings experience. But what stands out is his journey. Since being drafted, he has already been part of multiple organizations, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Cleveland Browns, and Chicago Bears, before landing in Philadelphia. That alone tells you he hasn't found consistency yet. Last season, his role diminished significantly. He logged just 142 total snaps and barely saw the field in Chicago, even on a defensive line that struggled to generate pressure outside of Montez Sweat. And that's where the risk and opportunity comes in. The Eagles are bringing in a player who hasn't produced consistently, but who still has upside. If you look at his sack production over the years, it's been modest. 4 as a rookie, 4 again in year 2, 5 in year 3, then a drop off to 2, and 0 last season. That's not what you expect from a first-round edge rusher. And when Tampa Bay declined his 5th-year option, it was a clear sign they believed he hadn't met expectations. But Philadelphia sees something others might not be maximizing. This is an organization that values competition across the entire roster, from the top players to the bottom of the depth chart. Even if Trion Shyena ends up as a rotational piece or fighting for a roster spot, the idea is simple. Raise the level of competition in the room, make everyone better. And when you look at the current edge group, it's clear this move doesn't solve everything. The room still feels incomplete. There's potential, yes, but also uncertainty. Alex Hunt showed flashes, especially late in the season and into the playoffs, with impressive pass rush metrics. Nolan Smith has talent but has battled injuries and is entering a crucial stage in his development. Arnold Ebiketie adds another layer, but again, nothing here feels fully established. So where does Trion Shyena fit into all of this? He's not a lock to make the roster. That's important to understand. This is a low-risk, high-upside move. If he performs, the Eagles win. If he doesn't, they move on with little consequence. But the key here is coaching. With Vic Fangio's defensive system and the presence of a strong defensive line coaching staff, the Eagles are betting that they can unlock something that hasn't consistently shown up on the field yet. And let's not overlook one important detail. He's still young. At 26, turning 27 shortly after the draft, he's not some aging veteran. There's still time for him to develop, to refine his game, and potentially become a valuable contributor. But this move also raises a bigger question about the Eagles' overall strategy at edge rusher, because even with this addition, it feels like something else is coming. Whether it's a trade for a high-level pass rusher or an early draft pick, this room still needs a true difference maker. So when you step back and look at the bigger picture, this signing is less about Trion Shyena himself and more about what it represents. It's another example of the Eagles betting on traits, pedigree, and their internal development system. It's about building depth with upside rather than settling for low-ceiling players. And now it turns into a real competition heading into training camp. The question is, can the Eagles actually unlock the potential that made him a first-round pick? Or is this just another name that comes and goes without making a real impact? Because if you follow the logic behind this move, it starts to feel like this isn't the final piece of the puzzle. It's just one layer of a much bigger plan that's still unfolding. The Eagles didn't bring in Trion Shyena expecting him to suddenly become a double-digit sack player overnight. That's not how this front office operates. What they're doing is stacking options, creating internal battles, and making sure that no position group becomes stagnant. And when you really zoom in on this edge rusher room, you can see why that matters so much right now. Alex Hunt is still developing. His trajectory is promising, especially when you look at advanced metrics like pass rush win rate and pressures, where he quietly became one of the more efficient edge defenders in specific situations. But he's still relatively new to the position, considering he he transitioned from safety earlier in his career. That means there's upside, but also unpredictability. Nolan Smith is another interesting case. Former first-round pick, elite athleticism, high motor, but durability has been a concern dating back to his college days. When he's on the field, he flashes real impact. He plays aggressively, sets the edge well, and has shown he can disrupt quarterbacks. But the key phrase there is when he's on the field. This upcoming season is crucial for him, especially with the possibility of a fifth-year option decision looming down the line. Arnold Ebiketie adds depth, but again, we're not talking about a proven dominant force off the edge. So when you stack all of this together, you start to understand why the Eagles are approaching this position the way they are. They're not relying on one player to carry the group. They're building a rotation filled with former high-upside prospects and seeing who rises. And that brings us back to Trion Shyena. What makes his situation fascinating is the context of his career so far. He's played under multiple defensive coordinators, Todd Bowles in Tampa Bay, Jim Schwartz in Cleveland, and Dennis Allen in Chicago. Those are respected defensive minds, each with different systems and philosophies. Yet despite that exposure, he hasn't been able to carve out a consistent role or elevate his production. That can be interpreted in two ways. Either he's a player who simply hasn't developed as expected, or he's someone who hasn't found the right system, the right coaching, or the right opportunity. The Eagles are clearly betting on the second possibility, and if there's one thing this organization has confidence in, it's their ability to develop talent internally. They've built a culture where players are put in positions to maximize what they do best, not forced into roles that don't fit their strengths. That's where Vic Fangio's influence could be critical. His defensive schemes are known for being structured, disciplined, and tailored to create opportunities for pass rushers to succeed within the system. So imagine this scenario for a moment. Trion Shyena comes into training camp with nothing guaranteed. He's fighting for a role, competing against younger players, and trying to prove that he belongs. That kind of environment can either expose a player or bring out the best in them. And for someone with his physical tools and background, sometimes that's exactly what's needed. But even if he shows flashes, the bigger question still lingers. Will that be enough? Because the reality is the Eagles still don't have a clear, established top-tier edge rusher in this group as it stands. That's why you can't rule out additional moves. The front office has consistently shown that they are willing to be aggressive if the right opportunity presents itself. Whether it's through the draft or a potential trade, this position feels like it still has another chapter to be written before the season begins. And that's what makes this moment so intriguing for Eagles fans. You're watching a roster take shape in real time, piece by piece. Some moves are obvious. Others, like this one, require you to read between the lines, because sometimes it's not about the individual signing. It's about how that signing fits into a much larger blueprint. Right now, the Eagles are building competition, preserving flexibility, and leaving the door open for something bigger. So as we move closer to the draft and continue through the offseason, keep your eyes on this position group, because if another move happens, and history suggests it might, this entire conversation could shift very quickly. Because if you take everything we've talked about so far and push it one step further, you start to see the pressure building, not just on Trion Shyena, but on this entire edge unit, and in a bigger sense, on the front office's vision for this defense. The Eagles are clearly walking a fine line right now. On one side, they're trusting their system, their coaching, and their ability to develop players who haven't fully broken out yet. On the other side, they know that competing at the highest level in the NFL requires consistent pressure on the quarterback, and that's something this group as it stands hasn't definitively proven it can deliver over a full season. That's why every rep in training camp is going to matter. Trion Shyena isn't coming in as a featured piece. He's coming in as a test case, a former first-round talent, still young, still physically gifted, but at a crossroads in his career. This is the type of situation where players either revive their trajectory or fade out of the league's rotation entirely. There's very little middle ground, and the Eagles are creating an environment where that outcome will reveal itself quickly. Think about the competition he's walking into. Jalen Hurts is ascending and already showing efficiency in key pass rush situations. Nolan Smith is fighting to solidify his role and prove he can stay healthy and consistent. Arnold Ebiketie is trying to carve out a reliable spot in the rotation. None of these players are guaranteed anything, and that's exactly the point. The Eagles don't want comfort, they want urgency, and that urgency could be the factor that determines whether this defensive front becomes a strength or a lingering concern. Another layer to this is how the coaching staff chooses to deploy these players. Vic Fangio's system isn't about reckless aggression, it's about calculated pressure, discipline, and forcing offenses into mistakes. That means edge rushers need to be more than just athletic. They need to be technically sound, aware, and adaptable. For Trion Shyena, that could be both a challenge and an opportunity. If he buys into that structure, refines his approach, and plays within the system, there's a path for him to become a useful contributor. Maybe not a star, but a reliable piece in a rotation that thrives on depth and versatility. But if he struggles to adjust, if the same inconsistencies show up again, the Eagles won't hesitate to move on. That's the reality of a one-year low-risk deal, and this brings us back to the bigger picture, because everything about this move suggests that the Eagles are still evaluating, still exploring, still leaving room for something else to happen. The draft is right around the corner, and historically, this is where teams like Philadelphia make impactful additions. If there's an edge rusher they believe can step in and make an immediate difference, they won't pass on that opportunity. So now you're looking at a scenario where Trion Shyena isn't just competing against the players currently on the roster. He could soon be competing against incoming talent as well. That's what makes this situation so dynamic. Nothing is locked in. Nothing is settled, and for fans, that creates both excitement and uncertainty. You can see the potential, you can understand the strategy, but until these players step onto the field and prove it, there's always going to be that question lingering in the background. Can this group actually deliver when it matters most? Because at the end of the day, that's what all of this comes down to. Not projections, not pedigree, not past draft status, but production. Getting to the quarterback. Changing games, making the plays that define seasons, and the Eagles know that. So as this offseason continues to unfold, keep watching closely, because whether it's Trion Shyena stepping up, one of the younger players breaking out, or a new addition entering the picture, something has to give. This position group will define a big part of how far this team can go. And the more you connect all these dots, the more it starts to feel like the Eagles are setting a very specific kind of trap, not for opponents, but for their own roster, a controlled environment where only the players who truly produce, adapt, and evolve are going to survive. Because let's be honest, this isn't just about adding depth anymore. This is about pressure from the top down. Howie Roseman has built this roster in a way where no one can feel safe, especially in this edge group. And when you bring in a player like Trion Shyena, with his background, his draft status, and his physical profile, you're not just adding another body, you're sending a message to everyone else in that room. Nothing is guaranteed. And that message becomes even louder when you remember how the Eagles typically operate during this phase of the offseason. We're heading toward the draft, and historically, this is where the front office makes aggressive, calculated decisions. They're not afraid to invest premium picks in positions they've already addressed if they believe it raises the ceiling of the team. So now imagine this scenario. The Eagles go into the draft and select an edge rusher early, someone explosive, polished, and ready to contribute right away. Suddenly, the competition becomes even more intense. Now, Trion Shyena isn't just battling for snaps. He's battling to stay on the roster.